Welcome to Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. Tonight we're surfing the web. We'll look at a few of the kinds of things that you can find on the internet that relate to language, especially to native languages and, of course, even more especially to Oklahoma native languages. First problem, of course, is you've got to get on the internet, and I don't want to spend much time talking about this, but let me just say, if you aren't already hooked up, why not? I'm sure a low-tech person, and I managed to get dragged kicking and screaming there, and it's not nearly as hard as I thought it would be. There's a lot that I don't know, but I know you don't have to know very much to make a lot of good use out of the internet, so I encourage everyone to do that. If finances are stopping you, just remember you don't really need to have your own computer, and it doesn't need to be expensive. For one thing, you may be able to make use of someone else's computer, maybe at a tribal office or at a public library. I think most public libraries nowadays have free public access to the internet. At least for a limited time. They might limit you to an hour at a time or something, but enough that you can learn a lot. If you do have a little bit of money, you can buy a perfectly good used computer that will get you on and be, you know, the minimum that you would need for just a couple $100 these days. So there's not a whole lot of excuse for not going on if you think it might be of any use to you. So those of you who aren't online yet, this program is partly to encourage you to realize that it could be of use to you if you're interested in native language preservation. And well, let's say now that you are online, that you got there by whatever means, by hook or by crook, but maybe you're just not familiar with what language sites exist. That's mainly what we want to talk about tonight. I'd like to give you a few ideas of where to look, what sort of sites you might find interesting, and of course you'll find many more that I'm not going to mention. This is just a sampling and it'll be incomplete. And anyway, things are changing all the time on the internet. Some of these sites will be up this week and down next week. A lot of them, I tried to pick more stable ones, but you can never be sure, so it's good to know how to search once you're on the internet too. But anyway, this is just to give you a little taste, give you some ideas of how to get started and what might be some interesting sites. I want to look at basically 4 different types of sites that might be useful to people who are interested in or involved in language preservation. One type would be funding sites, places where you can find out how to get money for your program. A second would be multiple language sites, sites that have lots of language material on different languages in them or linked to them. And then specific language sites where you can go and find something about Caddo or Arapaho or a specific language. And then finally a few miscellaneous things. So let's start with the funding sites. I have just a few listed here. There are many more. And again, you need to learn to surf so that you can get your own good ideas. But here are some of the ones that I know people have used so far in getting funding for their language programs. One, state Oklahoma level organization is the Oklahoma Arts Council. It's at http://www.state.ok.us/arts. I'm just realizing it's going to take too long to read all the HTTPs, but I'll read you at least a brief version of each address since this print is a little bit small, I think. Try to help you if you're taking notes. So anyway, this is the Oklahoma Arts Council site, and one of the things they do, of course, is give grants to arts-related programming. They don't specifically have language in their mission, but language, of course, is necessary to songs and sometimes to acting, to storytelling, and different things like that. So sometimes Arts Council funding will be appropriate. They've recently gone to a new system which is entirely done online. You can't give them a paper application. You have to get a username and a password and do all your applying online. So you need to get on the online in order to be able to get money from them. Next is the Oklahoma Humanities Council, oklahomahumanities.council.org. This is more of just an information site. It has lots of different kinds of information, including information on how to get grants from them, when their grant deadlines are and amounts available and so forth. And the Humanities Council does specifically list language as one of the types of humanities interests that they want to support. So that's definitely a potential source of money. Next is the Endangered Language Fund. The Wordpath show has gotten grants a couple of times from ELF. They operate out of Yale University. I was trying to get on their site today, so I'll warn you that it seems to be down temporarily, I'm sure. But it's superior.ling, as in linguist, .edu/ELF/index.html. And then one of the I think of this as one of the mothers of all funding sites, is a place called the Foundation Center, which was originally in New York City. There's now a foundation center in New York and 4 others around the country, and a number of other smaller centers, including one in Oklahoma City, are sort of allied with this network of foundation centers. And what they are is basically a nonprofit organization designed to help nonprofit organizations find funding. So they have wonderful directories, many of which are now online. I think maybe they're all online by now. And you can find them at foundationcenter.fdncenter.org. One that I did not get on the printout here, but I do want to mention too, is the National Park Service. You can find them at nps.gov. And once you get on there, look through, you'll find you need to fish around a little bit, but keep going until you find something that says grants. And then under that, look at National Historic Preservation. There's a category there specifically intended for federally recognized tribes to do cultural and historic preservation projects. And this is another potential source of funding for language work. Now, let's look at our next page. And this is the multi-language sites. The first one's kind of interesting, belllabs.com. Go to belllabs.com/project/TTS. And this is a little thing, they call it a translator. I only looked at this briefly today. I was not familiar with it before. But it looks like a fun site. They do speech-to-text translation, or was it text-to-speech? Somehow you type in and it will pronounce things for you, or vice versa. I'm not sure. Now, they don't specialize in native languages. Right now, they only deal with American English, German, Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, French, and Italian. And then they have if you fish around, you'll find a cute little thing for Pig Latin. You can type in an English sentence and it'll give you the Pig Latin equivalent. And there's a little tiny, just a tiny sampling of Navajo as well. But basically it's a European language site, but kind of a fun thing. The next one is Ethnologue. You can find this at ethnologue.org. And this is related to another site I'm going to mention in a minute, Summer Institute of Linguistics. Summer Institute of Linguistics is at sil.org. And it's basically it's an organization whose mission is to do work with endangered and indigenous languages around the world. It was founded, as I understand it, in relation to religious concerns, wanting to be able to translate the Bible into all the languages of the world, for instance. And in order to do that, you need to understand that language and get some bilingualism going and some literacy, which is often absent in the more minority communities in many countries around the world. So they've had to do, and they have through the recent decades done a lot of good basic linguistic work. They have excellent linguists working for them. And the SIL site is very interesting. It has a lot of interesting things, including a catalog bookstore you can order online. They offer software for language work that'll help you do interlinear translations, help you make dictionaries. They have fonts that they offer. Some of these things are for free and some are inexpensive, but it's I would consider it a fairly generous site, and you might find some things that will be useful there. I think most of their stuff is offered both for a PC type computer system, Windows environment, or for Mac. And if you get on the SIL site, it will link you to something called Ethnologue, which is sort of a subset of the material that they have to offer. And the Ethnologue is basically a directory of languages of the world. I have a hard copy Ethnologue from about 10 years ago. It's a thick volume that lists all the languages that they're aware of so far anyway in the world, and gives a little information about each one, what language family they're in, what country they're spoken in, whether there is what they call a translation need. In other words, is everyone already bilingual, in which case their Bible translation need will be sort of not applicable, or is it a case where they might want to work on eventually getting to where they can translate the Bible to this language, and that sort of thing. Estimates of numbers of speakers, I believe, are in there as well. And it's widely considered a pretty reliable source. You have to take all of these count the speakers things with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I think it's one of the most reliable sources that there is for languages around the world, including Native American languages and many others. Now, this next site is about European language legislation. I thought people might just be interested in it for comparison's sake. You know, with this new European Union stuff, there are a lot of sort of trans-European policies being set, and governmental stances on different issues, and language has been a very active issue in that arena. And this troc.es/CIEMEN/Mercator is an interesting site because it gives you Ignore that CS at the end. That was my note to myself that I forgot to delete. It is ES, not CS, in the middle there. Anyway, it's a site about European Union language policy, and it lists all of the languages, including minority languages of Europe, of which a lot of people aren't aware of how many there are, but there are many, many minority languages, a number of which are endangered. It's not the same situation we talk about here, but in many ways there are similarities, and it's interesting to see what kind of statements they're coming up with. Some of them are very strong. Now, I wouldn't want to forget our own Wordpath site, the Intertribal Wordpath Society. I want to mention it mainly for the links that it has. It's at ahalenia.com/IWS. And on this site, you can find some information about our organization, who's on the board, how you can contribute, of course, and we keep a sort of a running count estimate of the language statuses, the status of languages in Oklahoma, about how many speakers, fully fluent speakers, are left of each language, about how many languages are left, still viable languages. There's also a little section on there about English only, which needs updating since we recently heard that the Supreme Court had ruled against the English only petition. And then there's a section on the Wordpath show and calling for volunteer crew members. And there's also a section on the Oklahoma Indian Language Heritage Protection Act, which we wrote at the Wordpath Society and which passed the legislature year before last as Senate Concurrent Resolution 37. You can read that online if you'd like. We also link to several language sites, which I won't go into here. Some of them I've already mentioned, others I haven't. And we need to check that and see if any of those are out of date now, too. You really need to keep on top of this stuff. But remember, whenever you go to a site, a multi-language site, look, there's usually a section. On a menu, you'll find something called links, usually. Always click on that, because sometimes that's the most valuable part of a certain site, is the things that they can link you to that you didn't know about yet. The next one, let's see, Summer Institute of Linguistics, I already talked about, sil.org. The next one is SCILA, which is the Society for the Study of the Indigenous Languages of the Americas. I've encouraged people on this show before to look into SCILA and perhaps become a member. It's very cheap, about $12 a year to become a member. And it's not just a bunch of linguists like a lot of these language organizations are. I think it's probably majority non-linguists. There are linguists and native people and interested individuals and all sorts of people on there. It's a very good source. You can get on their, they have an email list that you can get on that's very informative. They not only mention things like grant deadlines and what sorts of things people have been doing with their language. There's a sort of sometimes somebody asks the question, does anybody know where I can find a font for such and such, or all sorts of interesting information. It's very, very useful. And you can get a lot of this information by going to their website at scila.org. They also have, I think, some fonts and so forth that you might want to download. I know another thing they have is a directory of members. If you have heard that there's a certain linguist who's really good with your language, but you don't know how to get a hold of them, the scila.org site is one place where you might be able to get a telephone number or an email address for other people that are interested in the same language that you are. Now, the next site is called TerraLingua. It's at terralingua.org. And this is an international organization, nonprofit organization, that's dedicated to kind of promoting diversity of not only language, but also culture and biological diversity. And that their philosophy is that there's a critical link between these. People have said to me many times, when you lose your homeland, you know right away your language and your culture are at risk more than they were before. So there's at least that kind of link. And they go into this question much deeper. But it's very interesting in that they address all three questions. Diversity and threat to diversity of biological things, cultural things, and linguistic things. Quite an interesting site. Then there's a site called the Language Museum at language-museum.com. This just links to a lot of different pages on different languages, and you might find one there that you're interested in, including some native languages, if I remember correctly. OU Western History Collections. I just mentioned that as a you could call it a multi-language site. It's not really a language site per se, but if you go to ou.edu and surf through there to the libraries and eventually come to OU Western History Collections, that's a non-circulating collection, but they have some old manuscripts, some in English, which are oral histories of Oklahoma tribes, and there is some Indian language in there as well, and there's the old Indian for Indians radio show is in that collection. And you can get tapes of those, so you can look up what's on each tape and what you might want to get a copy of, or go and listen to or look at the library. Then the final one in this section is NativeWeb, nativeweb.org. it's got also many pages for many different languages linked to it, many of which are not on the other sites I've already mentioned. Some are, some aren't. And they also have a book and music center that relates to Native issues, and some of them specifically to language issues. So those are some fun ones to just fish around and look at languages you didn't even know you were interested in until you see what interesting things are out there. And it's just kind of fun, interesting. But now suppose you have in mind that you want to find out about a specific language. That's what this next list is about. And this is just a sampling. I sort of had it on my list to maybe go through all the tribes of Oklahoma, all the languages, and do a search on each one and see what I could come up with. I ran out of time, and besides, I think I'll leave that to you in the audience because, as I say, it's something that changes from time to time, and once you have the tools in your hand, you'll be able to do that for yourself. So this is just a sampling, and these are not all Oklahoma languages either, as you'll see. But I guess these are alphabetic, well, partially alphabetic. Anyway, the first one listed here is the Caddo site. That, like the IWS site, is attached to ahalenia.com, which is a site of America Meredith, a Wordpath supporter and a Caddo language supporter. So you go to ahalenia.com/Kiwat. Kiwat is the Caddo word for home. And when you go under Kiwat there, you'll find out information about the Kiwat Hasine Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to Caddo language and oral traditions. It's a rather beautiful site, I think, and has information about how to contact them, the types of things that they're doing. It's not a sales site yet, at least. It may ultimately be because the Kiwat Hasine Foundation has developed some books and is developing CD-ROMs and so forth, but they're not doing that online yet, but there's information on how to do that by telephone or by mail. The next one is Cherokee Nation. If you go to cherokee.org, that's the whole Cherokee Nation site, which is huge. It has so many subparts to it. But go through there until you find Cherokee language, and they have a number of interesting things in there, including something they call a word list. They specifically say they don't want to call it a dictionary because it's not such a highfalutin thing with all the information about each entry. It's basically a translation tool. They call it a word list, but I think of it as kind of a translator. So you can type in a Cherokee word, and they tell you what kind of spelling conventions to use, and it will tell you the meaning of the word if it's in their list. I thought that was an original kind of thing that I hadn't yet seen online. The next one is having to do with Chickasaw. You can go to chickasaw.net, go to the /services, and then /heritage. And you'll find some language information on there. Then there's the Choctaw Nation. I was on there rather hurriedly today, and I may have missed something. I was surprised that I didn't see more than I did. I may have missed something. So surf around in there and see what you can find. But as we've mentioned on the show before, the Choctaw Nation has one of the more elaborate and well-developed and well-funded and extensive language programs of most of the tribes that I know of. They have public school classes, they have online classes, they have satellite classes, adult classes in many different communities, they have publications in Choctaw language, all kinds of things. I didn't find very much of that on their website, but I'm sure you'll be able to at least get a phone number or an address of how to find out more about that. And it may be in there somewhere. I may have missed it. Next, another nice site is the Comanche Language and Cultural Preservation Committee. Now they're at comanchelanguage.org. And they have a number of interesting sections on their site. They give a little history of the committee, a statement of its mission, accomplishments so far. And then they have a store section too, where they have a number of things. I was very impressed today. They had a lot more things for sale than I had been aware of before. I was aware that they offered a dictionary and some flashcards that that are mainly sold, I think, to help children learn. Adults can use them too, of course, that have like a picture on one side and a Comanche word on the other. They have a set of those that they've developed. They also sell, the Language Committee sells handmade dolls made by some of the Comanche, actually I think mostly by committee members. They just hand make these dolls one at a time. They're of a similar type, I think about 2 feet high, in traditional dress. They're very charming, and they sell those not so much to sell them for their own sake, but to raise money for their language work, which I think is a very smart thing to do. They also have the new things that they have that I hadn't heard about before. They're offering a grammar, I think a little word book with pictures and simple Comanche language in it, but they have some more jewelry type things. I believe they had earrings, buttons like a lapel button, Some of these things have the Comanche tribal logo on them, and others have, or the seal, and others specifically have the logo for the Comanche Language and Cultural Preservation Committee on them. Some of them have Comanche language on them. They have things like ball caps and T-shirts, and I don't remember exactly what all. Let's see, bumper stickers. Several different things with Comanche language on them or promoting Comanche language. It's a pretty nice site, and might give you some ideas of what to do with your own language if Comanche is not your specific interest. It's always fun to go and see what other folks are doing because you might pick up some ideas that you'd like to do as well. Next one is for Delaware language materials. You can go to the Delaware Tribe of Indians, and that's now the official title of the tribe that I think of as the Bartlesville Tribe or the Eastern Delaware Tribe within Oklahoma. So go to delawaretribeofindians.nsn.us, and if you go to the gift section, they have various things for sale there, including Lenape, which is the native term that they use for their own language, the Lenape or Delaware grammar, in other words. They have a mini dictionary. They have hats with Lenape seals and language and things on them. And they have a T-shirt, which I thought was amusing, that says, I'm guessing at the pronunciation, something like Taktani. Apparently it means I don't know in Lenape. So you can get a T-shirt that says that, and it'll probably lead to some amusing conversations. There's also, this is a non-Oklahoma language, but this is an interesting site. There's one for learning the Karuk language, which is spoken in Northern California, and this is at karuk.org. It has nice links to other kind of more scholastic sites, but it also has some built-in language lessons that you can just learn these lessons as you surf their site. Then there's this is not an Oklahoma tribe, but they speak virtually the same language. That's the Mississippi Choctaw tribe. You can find them at choctaw.org. And they have an extensive language program, also very extensive, interesting things going on, and a lot of that's referenced on their site. KHF, I already mentioned, that's the Caddo site. Kiwat Hasine Foundation is what KHF is. So let's just look at this last page. We're down to about 3-4 minutes now. Whoops. And these are kind of just for fun kind of things, really. The first two have to do with Canadian television. There's AFTN, which is a television network in Canada, which I've forgotten what the AP stands for, APTN, something television network, but it's a native-controlled television network, and there's a lot of native language programming on it. And they have, I don't know if you can actually view the video clips or if you have to send off for that, but they have descriptions of different programs that have been done, and you can also order copies, I think. And then the second one is a similar thing, mushkeg.ca for Canada. And their email is mushkeg@videotron.ca. This is also Canadian native TV. Let's see, I believe it's the AFTN network. I think that's the one that has some programming in Mohawk and Cree as well as English and French. Going down to the next one, we have the Center for Applied Linguistics. This is just sort of, I didn't know where else to put it, it's kind of general linguistic interest. It does not give you language data or specific information on specific languages. But it's about, applied linguistics is sort of the area that has to do with developing alphabets, learning how to teach, learning how to learn, developing teaching materials. And a lot of their stuff is oriented to teaching English, but if you look at some of what they have to say, a lot of it could be transferable to the native language teaching situation. I believe they have a little information about native language teaching too, and about bilingual education. It's an interesting site. The organization is in Washington, D.C., and they're at cal.org, Center for Applied Linguistics. Now this next one is kind of fun. It's by a friend of mine, John Kuntz, at the University of Colorado. It's called, well, I don't know that it really has a name. I call it the Kemosabe and Tonto page. You go to spot.colorado.edu/Kuntz/FAQ/etymology. And under there you will find etymologies for Kemosabe and Tonto from the old Lone Ranger radio and television series. This is a very knowledgeable person who knows a lot about Siouan languages especially. And although I think he came up with a non-Siouan source for this, a lot of people have their own version of where these names came from. And he has other interesting etymologies or word histories on there that relate to native languages. Finally, there's, I call this Teaching Picks to Copy. The actual site name is langpicks.com. That should have a www in front of it. And the idea is this is pictures that you can use for language teaching, and you can just download them, and they're sort of freeware. You can just use them in your language classes if you like. And the last one is really fun. This is Necco, which is the acronym for the New England Candy Company, Necco. They make those little round candy discs that you can get in a roll, and they also make those conversation hearts that they sell around Valentine's Day with little conversational expressions on them. And believe it or not, you can order them custom made to your own language. They probably are limited to regular keyboard type fonts, and there's a certain limitation to how many characters you can have per line and how many lines, depending on whether you get the small hearts or the larger ones. And the big catch is you have to order 3,500 pounds. But wouldn't it be lovely to have, Choctaw conversation hearts or Creek or Cheyenne conversation hearts? It can be done. So you get some marvelous ideas on the net. There are lots of things you can find on the net that you'll find nowhere else. And there are also ideas for things that you can get off the net and then do by telephone or in person, ideas you can use in your own classrooms and so forth. And a lot of it's very interesting, and a lot of it's a lot of fun. So happy surfing, and I'll see you next time on Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita.